is That So Second Millennium, where we explore issues at the interface between science, philosophy, and Catholic theology. I'm your host, Paul Giesting, and your co-host is Bill Schmidt. This is episode 135 of That So Second Millennium. We don't have a lot of hard-hitting interviews on That So Second Millennium, but I'd say this is one of them. Today we have an interview with Father Bob Spitzer that I got to be part of this time, which is very exciting. Previously, Father Spitzer had talked to Bill, and we'd recorded a conversation just between the two of them back on episode about 20. But today we talked to him together, and Father Spitzer has some pretty provocative stuff to talk about. He compares the trend toward atheism and toward people becoming what are called nuns in the broader culture with the trend toward theism among practicing scientists. That's shocking. You're not going to hear that everywhere. I couldn't help but be reminded of our conversation with Matthew Cloud about Americans specifically refusing to get into tech because, well, it involves math and math is hard. Yeah, we obviously, we exploit tech, we use it, we venerate it in a sense, and we definitely venerate science, and yet we're unwilling to do what's necessary to actually get into it and understand it for ourselves as a statistical average across the broader culture. It's kind of amazing. He talks about reasons from physics to believe in a provident creator, which is a major focus of his. He's started a new website called PurposefulUniverse.com, where he discusses his strategy for that website to try to come across people's radar who aren't necessarily searching right now, to give them ideas to think and try to look beyond the shallowness of everyday life, and then draw them in toward considering God and Jesus Christ specifically. He also talks about the evidence from psychology about the awful toll exacted by gender reassignment surgery, which is stuff that you're just not going to hear across the bulk of the internet, even with people who will express opposition to the idea. They don't talk about the actual toll. They don't talk about the actual price. They don't talk about the actual problems that are being faced by those people. Not enough, anyway. So we're very proud to bring you this interview. And here is Father Bob Spitzer.
We're delighted to welcome Father Robert Spitzer, S.J., back to our microphones. Father has been the president of the Magis Center for about 10 years, producing, I think, more valuable and learned multimedia products in those 10 years than I think most similar organizations do over many decades. It's just a tremendously prolific and wonderful ministry and service that the Magis Center is performing under his guidance. Father was president of Gonzaga University prior to that, and that was from 1998 to 2009. And he has written numerous books that not only touch on many aspects of Catholic theology and philosophy and spirituality and pastoral concerns, but what I love about it is that all of his books and all of his conversations online or on air seem to intertwine all those beautiful aspects, the theology, the philosophy, the spirituality, and a true love, pastoral care of individuals and of groups. One of the groups that he guides extremely well is the Napa Institute, which many of our listeners may have heard of. Now, lastly, just a mention of his multimedia presence. Magis has 3 websites, and one is magiscenter.com, one is crediblecatholic.com, and the newest one, Father, right, is Purposeful Universe.com.
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, well, you're the quintessential host and quintessential guide on many, many subjects. We love you on the Father Spitzer's Universe, which appears weekly on EWTN. I think that's must-see TV as far as I'm concerned. It really is.
Indeed.
It's great. So let me start with my first question. I think of your framework of the 4 levels of happiness all the time. I think that's still a real fundamental guide for understanding human aspirations, et cetera, and society's functioning now. So the second level of happiness that you've identified is ego gratification and competition, right? And the third is kind of a common good, a greater good recognition with a willingness to sacrifice for that. It hasn't yet reached a level understanding that it's really all about God and the Holy Spirit guiding that. But it's that third level is definitely something to aspire to. And what these days, it seems to me, sometimes our culture has generally favored the third level of happiness. Even our Constitution talks about the common good, and President Kennedy talked about ask not what your country can do for you, etc. It's always been there, but right now it seems as though almost our culture is slipping back to a level 2 kind of mind frame. And do you think of it that way? And is it becoming a level 2 that's even more aggressive in its competitiveness and therefore risky and more prone toward a culture of death as opposed to a culture of life?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. That ego comparative identity, who's achieving more, who's achieving less, who's got more power, less power, more intelligence, less intelligence, more popularity, less popularity, more status, less status, etc. That whole mentality has become almost obsessive within the culture. Facebook and, social medias, Instagram, etc., have not helped. This has just been definitely, it exacerbates, anxieties among young people. They are so ego comparative now that the first consequence is they suffer from what I call the symptoms of the comparison game. But more than that, the symptoms now have manifest themselves in hugely increased rates of depression, anxiety, suicides, impulsivity, etc. This was prior to COVID. So it's pretty bad out there, but concomitant with that, and probably relating to the increased rates of suicide and of depression and anxiety, is the decrease in religion. So this, what I call level 2 obsession, has replaced level 4, which is getting meaning and identity from God, the absolute, from religion, from the eternal, from something that has ultimate and absolute significance. That fourth level of transcendent meaning. If you get rid of it completely, you have no ground for hope in a better future, no ground for a belief in some kind of purpose and meaning that goes beyond this worldly existence, and indeed beyond the triviality of my own world. And once that's gone, you can just see the combined effects of the comparison game. Who's achieving more, who's achieving less, who's got more intelligence, less intelligence. You can see that replacing religion, which is normally a self-giving, sacrificial, worship-filled, recognition of a creator that's beyond myself, and a desire, to move into the creator's will for me. That replacement is terrible for the emotional health of our young people. And as I said, it's just not, it was, the sexual revolution didn't help matters any. That certainly got things off the ground. Then the absolutizing of freedom by the university establishment, the so-called university elites. And then finally, the elevation of psychology to almost the state of a religion, which many, psychologists called out, way back in the 1960s and 70s. All of those things were, of course, starters for the whole trend. And now we've got, the transgender agenda And that doesn't help because, as you can, you move into that domain and you have a staggering 19 times increase in suicide. 19 times. That's nearly 2,000%. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is terrible for your emotional health. So you can imagine all these things, put together. And what you're dealing with now is you add Instagrams, Facebook, social media, get my profile updated, ego comparative, and don't bother. The new atheism has finally put the cherry on the horrible sundae. The idea that we're going to just take God away from people because it's all non-rational. When in point of fact, for the first time in history, scientists are becoming more and more believers than ever before. The latest Pew survey of the American Association for the Advancement of Science shows that 51% of scientists are theists, believers in God, whereas 41% are either agnostics or atheists. What's really interesting, though, is the trend among young scientists. I think that's 40 years and younger. That group of scientists has 66% theists and only 30% agnostics and atheists. So the trend is definitely among the scientists is toward belief in God, whereas in the public, have really kind of gotten our poor kids by the throat and are just selling them a bill of goods when the evidence for God from science, creation from science, intelligent design from science, for the soul from peer-reviewed medical studies and near-death experiences, et cetera, is getting greater and greater.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
I had the privilege of reading your book from a few years ago, The New Proofs for the Existence of God. It's a fascinating read. It's one of those books that, it's a whole library of other things from mathematics and the infinite. But yeah, that's a fascinating to think about. Our culture, it glorifies science, but it's not pushing people into science.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not teaching people to be scientists. Sorry.
That's true. That's true on all counts. And it's certainly not reflecting the belief of scientists in the transcendent in God.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in with those 4 levels of happiness is it's almost like, in political terms, we talked a whole lot in recent years about building a wall. Let's not get political, but I'm thinking, I'm visualizing that our culture is trying to build a wall between level 3 and level 4. And it's almost like it's posting deceptive signs for those who want to or who have that aspiration to approach level 4. It's saying, make a U-turn here, go back to level 2 and start all over. Mm-hmm. Is there something like that going on? Because if we don't have level 4, then we have nothing to beckon us forward, really, to motivate us onward to spiritual growth.
Well, there's something to St. Augustine's statement, for thou hast made us for thyself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee.
Yeah.
In other words, if we don't have level 4, Augustine is right, we're going to have an experience deeply, because we're made for a relationship with God, right? We're going to experience deeply emptiness, alienation, loneliness, dread, fear, and guilt on a very, very profound level. And you can't imagine what those feelings are like the more distant we get from God. And does the evil spirit use that? Of course, the evil spirit uses that. And of course, tries to sort of exaggerate the alienation, the emptiness that we already feel from natural causes. But all that being said, I mean, is it happening in our culture? Yes, it is. I think the new atheism is definitely a materialistic and secularistic movement. It's, they're not giving, what's in Dawkins' book, The God Delusion? Nothing new. It's just the same old rebaked what I would call agnosticism and tending toward atheism, which even Thomas Nagel, who says, I just really would like to be an atheist more than anything in the world. But quite frankly, the neo-Darwinian materialistic view of evolution is almost certainly wrong.
Right.
So, I mean, at least they're honest people, and Dawkins perpetuates the myth. So, my thought is, kids believe them. They don't know anything. They don't know what's going on in terms of new discoveries in cosmology. They don't know what's going on in terms of the new discoveries of the, design, within our free parameters, the exceedingly improbable design of the constants and initial conditions within the free parameters of our universe. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on in even peer-reviewed, medical studies and near-death experiences. They don't know what's going on, frankly, in the whole, discovery of evolution. Yes, they're fascinated by multiple dimensions of universes and all kinds of possibilities like that. And they throw around terms like, there must be some kind of an eternal inflation, which leads to an infinite multiverse where anything can happen. We don't need God anymore, except for one little thing. Even Stephen Hawking thought that eternal inflation in an infinite multiverse could never be commensurate with our kind of universe. And in fact, attacked it in his last paper that he wrote, for the Journal of High Energy Physics. Tom, we have a whole bunch of physicists, which I won't go through, but Tom Banks is worth, talking about, because he actually shows, again, that the eternal inflation scenario actually undermines the very principles of what's called Coleman-DeLucia tunneling that is needed for quantum gravity to get off the ground. It undermines that. So from an empirical point of view and a scientific point of view, the eternal inflation infinite multiverse hypothesis is not working. And then you've got Boltzmann brains and brief brains to top it all off. I mean, basically, if the eternal inflation hypothesis is correct, then every single one of us, we are not the carbon life forms we perceive ourselves to be. We are definitely Boltzmann brains that have basically fluctuated into existence in a thermal vacuum, and few seconds later, by the way, with pre-programmed memories of ourselves being carbon-based life forms in a universe like this one, with friends like Bill Schmidt and Paul and everybody around us. Paul. Right? We know all these things are there. So what? Yeah.
There's a lot for Occam's razor to attack in that, that picture.
Absolutely. Yeah. Paul Davies described it this way. He said, "Wow, it's like bringing excess baggage of Occam's razor to cosmic extremes."
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
My goodness. Yeah. Well, you all thought epicycles were bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seriously. Oh my gosh.
One of the big things that you've helped so much on is the reteaching teachers and students about the compatibility and indeed the synergy between science and religion. So I'm wondering now, given what we've been saying about, kind of a new religion approach, et cetera, what do you see going on now, or what do you consider might be next steps that we have to guard against, even in Catholic schools? Already, students are being kind of deterred from religion by the promises of science, as poorly taught perhaps by some science teachers. But now it seems like students could even be distracted away from religion by this other religion, which seems to really feed their sense of, I want an instant available new identity for myself, and I want to create reality for myself. That's actually even more luxury than real science offers. It's almost like three things are competing with each other: religion, false religion, and science, or maybe false science too.
Yeah, I would say that all of the above is pretty much true. I think you've identified it. I do think, the false religion of you are who you want yourself to be.
Yeah.
That doesn't really work. And you can tell that doesn't really work when let's take transgenderism as, the statistic I was just talking about. We know what the cause of, somebody wanting a sexual reassignment surgery is. The cause is a great deal of anxiety. 65% of people who want sexual reassignment surgery have been abused as children. We know that 80% experience a great deal of anxiety in the household. And for boys, the anxiety of the mother is very significant. For girls, the anxiety of the father is significant. And so we know that there is, in 80% of these households, there's a great deal of anxiety in the household. And then there probably is some kind of latent homosexual desire. You combine all those anxieties, and what you have is somebody who does feel a tremendous sense of self-alienation, admittedly. Yeah. They think that the solution is to get a sex change, that they've got the wrong identity. But there's no scientific evidence, not a single scintilla of scientific evidence that shows that there's any such thing as a gene or a genetic or a biochemical or biophysical influence that makes for a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body. There's no possibility of, or there's no real, actuality of this at all. So there's no science behind it. And the reason there's no science behind it is because it's simply untrue. 80% of people will revert back without therapy to their natural biological identities if you just let them. And the other 20% that want the sexual surgeries, right, that they will need therapeutic help. But here is the upshot that shows that the myth is wrong. If you don't treat the anxiety, so if you tell the child, you want a new sexual identity, that's good. You go ahead, Joey, and you become a new girl, and I'm going to support you in that. And the minute you turn, 13 years old or 14 years old, good adolescent, you can go ahead and get on the hormones and get your sexual identity changed. No problem there. We're going to support you. Well, if you do that, here's what you can expect to find. Okay, so Joey gets the sexual reassignment surgery. And let's suppose he's 15 when everything is completed, 16, 17, whatever it may be, when the sexual reassignment surgery is completed. We can expect to find then that Joey will say for the first 2 years, this has really worked. My anxiety levels are now lowered. I feel like I really am who I'm supposed to be, who I was meant to be. And so then we can expect that the next 2 years, after that seeming feeling of everything is well and good, there's all of a sudden a realization that the anxieties haven't gone away at all. But all I did was suppress them in the belief that the sexual reassignment surgery, quote unquote, worked. Mm-hmm. And then I can expect to find in the subsequent 5th and 6th year that there's going to be a great deal of exacerbated depression. And the reason for that is because now I see 3 things. My anxiety level is exceedingly high. And this time I feel an alienation from my new sexual identity instead of from the old one. I look upon myself and I go, wait a minute, this isn't working. My anxiety level is worse than it was before the sexual reassignment surgery, and I've permanently damaged myself, and there's no return from what I have done to myself. And then we see the staggering, after the 6th year, we see the staggering 19 times increase in suicides because they're at a point of no return.
That is amazing. Yeah.
Just go back to your, we have to accept, who God created us to be and who we are in the world. We just don't have the luxury, as you put it, of reassigning our identity every time we turn around. We all grew up, and some of us grew up in well-educated families. Some did not. We can make up for some of that, but we can't change our past. Yeah. We just can't change that. I mean, Bill, you know me. I'm never going to be the consummate athlete. I mean, this is just I can't rewrite that script. It's in my body, you know. Aside from the blindness, there's the usual uncoordination and so forth and so on. So, I mean, you know, we have to, you know, some things can be improved. You know, obviously, I can, you know, take pains to try and become slightly more coordinated or something of that nature, but I'm never going to be, you know, a super athlete and so forth and so on. Some people, you know, they say, you know, I really, really want to be a physicist, but, you know, try as they might, that's just not their gift. Instead, their gift is literary, and that's okay. Do literature, you know. That's who you are. That's the muse you have received. You know, just that's where we have to build. And the new religion, it's so bankrupt. You know, if you think changing your identity is going to make you happy, you got to look at the secular academic studies, because it's screaming out precisely the opposite.
Right.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Modern society is conducting all these massive experiments on itself and refusing to look at the data afterward. What they're calling it is, you know, the true freedom, and true freedom will make you happy. Well, no, true freedom is based on truth. Right.
So,
That's a good starting point.
First thing, and if you don't have freedom based on truth, it's really not going to be true freedom, and it's not going to make you happy. False freedom based on falsity will surely make you unhappy in the long run.
Yeah. One or two other quick topics, if
Sure.
What you've been a champion all along of Eucharistic catechesis, Eucharistic coherence, the renewal that the bishops are working toward, with the USCCB meeting completed, and with everything that's gone on, and the prospect of much more coming forward, right, with the Eucharistic Congress in 2024, et cetera. What are your thoughts about the centrality of the Eucharist to what has to be our agenda now as Catholics, and also how do you see it working well and prosperously?
Yeah, good points. All of them. Number one, Jesus made the Eucharist central to the Catholic Church. Let's face facts. That commission of St. Peter, right in Matthew 16, 17 through 19, Jesus was definitely serious when he said, I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. He's creating an office with those keys. And the office is to the prime minister's office. The keys to the kingdom, right, is the prime minister's office. That's the person who holds the place of the king until the king returns. So he can run the government for the king as the king is out on expedition. And Jesus gives the keys to the kingdom of heaven to Peter. And I don't think that commission can be interpreted any other way other than that office was created for not only Peter, but for Peter's successors. It wouldn't be necessary to create an office and give it to Peter, and that's it. So I don't believe that the Protestant interpretation can ever hold water. I don't think it is really coherent from an exegetical point of view. But the second thing, though, is let's look at what Jesus said. Do this in memory of me. I mean, he says that about nothing else other than the Holy Eucharist. And that notion of reliving, that notion of anamnesis, of entering into the mystery once again, as he has described it, will give all the grace and the efficacy of what Jesus' salvific act. His intention is to, as it were, collapse time from the present moment back into the past, when he is literally giving his body and blood in the form of bread and wine, substantiated bread and wine, giving that to his apostles at the time of the Last Supper. So when you think about it, Jesus is saying this is the primary thing. Do this in memory of me. That is the primary way we stay together as Catholics. That's the primary way that we get the graces necessary for salvation. How do I know that? Because I read John 6:30 through 52. How do you interpret John 6:30 through 52? How can you possibly interpret it any other way? How does this sound? I am the bread come down from heaven. And, later on to say, the bread that comes down from heaven is life for the world. And then later to say, this bread is my flesh for the life of the world. Now, what more do we need than Jesus saying all of that, as it were, in the Gospel of John? What more do we need besides do this, relive this ritual, which is the real body and blood of Christ? And I can show that very definitively. We need to say that to the kids. Jesus is the one who made the Eucharist the center of the church, made the Eucharist the center of our spiritual lives, made the Eucharist his own gift of his self, his body, blood, soul, and divinity to us, right? What more do we need than the command of Jesus that this is the central rite? Now, of course, people go, well, that's great that he said it, but what he really meant is symbolism and so forth and so on. Let's go back to John 6 again. Why are all those apostles leaving Jesus in massive numbers after he gives the Eucharistic discourse? So much so that, Jesus says, well, are you going to leave me too, to his own apostles? And they go, no, Lord, we've come to believe and see that you have the words of eternal life and so forth. Now, what's the point? People are leaving not because Jesus said, I would like you to recall, the symbolism that I've gotten to. That's not a hard teaching. To remember that Jesus, taught something symbolically. This is not asking too much of anybody.
Yeah. Do this ritual. It doesn't even involve slitting a neck and sprinkling blood on anything. It's real simple.
Yeah,
exactly. So what we're dealing with, of course, is Jesus is saying this is my real body and my real blood, and that's hard for people to believe. But he's saying, I want you to do this. That's his command to us. So that's the first thing. The second thing that's pretty clear too is that what Jesus, is doing in the Eucharist, as I said, is collapsing the time between the present. He's giving them the prophetic ability to collapse the time between the present moment and the Last Supper, to infuse the very body and blood given at the Last Supper with the host and the wine, as the priest says and repeats and relives those Eucharistic words of Jesus. So when you really get down there, does the Eucharist really perform all of these transformative things? Does it really protect us from venial sin? Does it really forgive our venial sins? Does it really protect us from the evil spirit? Does it really transform us in the actual heart of Jesus? Does it really bring us a kind of peace, even in the midst of abject anxiety? Of course, it brings all these things. And people who receive the Holy Eucharist worthily know it is true. It's absolutely the case. I count myself as a primary example. As a young man in college, I was your definite, let's call it just hardwired utilitarian with a kind of, numbers approach to everything in life and not a whole lot of feelings for anybody or anything. That was just pretty much me. And slowly but surely people would come, and, I started going to daily mass because of a bet this guy gave me, well, Spitzer, what are you going to do? We're like, oh, I'll give up meat. He said, not me. I'm going to go to mass every day. And I thought, Bert Martinez can go to mass every day. I can go to mass every day during Lent. And I got hooked. And once I got hooked, I started changing. I really did listen to those homilies. I really did enter into that ritual. I really did receive the Eucharist, and I really found myself being transformed. People would say, Spitzer, you're changing. I say, no, I'm not changing. Same old utilitarian, hard numbers guy without much feeling for anybody or anything that I ever was. And they go, no, you're still the basic utilitarian, hard-nosed numbers guy with the no feelings, but you're getting less so. And, and of course, I was kind of the last guy to know. But it was really evident to me. And sooner or later, my religion became the most important thing in my life. I was wondering, what's going on here? Why do I feel this call to priesthood? The Eucharist. I'm absolutely sure of it. Yeah. So, the Eucharist, as my niece would have put it when she was a little kid, the Eucharist really works. I don't know what she meant by that.
Wow. Out of the mouths of babes. That's really wise.
It's a great thing to hang on to.
Yeah. Something you just mentioned, Father, talking about, the hard-nosed or the a bit more secularized approach reminded me of your new website, Purposeful Universe. And Paul, we were talking earlier, and that was your first discovery of the Magis Center when we were preparing for this, right?
Oh, I mean, I've looked at the Magis Center. I've looked at your blogs, Bill. Actually, you've got a few of them.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very privileged
there as well. But yeah.
Was there a particular?
And back in 2018, when you had a conversation with Father Spitzer, an incredible Catholic, so I've been there a few times. But I just visited Purposeful Universe today, and immediately got sucked into an article about Gregor Mendel and Darwin. There you go, sort of famous guy. This guy named Charles Darwin. You may have heard of him. But yeah, no. So it's just my initial random walk through it is it's pretty fascinating stuff. I'm very intrigued to read more. What's the purpose?
Purposeful Universe.
Overall, Father Spitzer of that website. There you go. Yeah.
Well, as you probably know, Credible Catholic is almost designed for teachers or students who are really engaged by the Catholic Church, who want to just go deeper and get answers to their questions about faith and science and metaphysics and evidence and proof and so forth. All those kinds of things, but it's for an engaged Catholic, for sure, mostly for teachers, priests, clergy, etc. We're trying to give free materials for teachers to use in their classes, things of that nature. But Magis Center, that's for people who are a little bit engaged and want to go deeper, read articles, get videos in the Shrouded Turin, near-death experience, etc. Then, what we're trying to do with Purposeful Universe is to give a halfway house, kind of. It's to sort of get to a person who has become essentially disengaged. In other words, they've sort of let religion go. They're in a state of apathy. They don't really want to practice anything in religion. And yet they're kind of clicking along in the blogosphere, clicking along in their various website search engines. And to just all of a sudden to see somebody like a physicist talking about design, and a Harvard physicist or something, or a scientist. It's just talking about there really are about 3 or 4 of these mysteries we cannot resolve, like low entropy at the Big Bang. It's the odds against it are 10 raised to the 10 raised to the 123 to 1. Which is the same as a monkey typing the entire corpus of Shakespeare by random tapping of the keys in a single try. Mm-hmm. Yet that low entropy is absolutely necessary for the carbon-based life forms and for the universe that we know of today. And you're telling me that our universe is the same odds as a monkey typing Shakespeare? Yes, that's right. That's exactly what I'm not just telling you that. Roger Penrose, the great physicist at Oxford, et cetera, and a zillion other physicists, because everyone knows the problem of low entropy. At
Roger Penrose, yeah.
So it's like a huge number of people. So here's the major thing is, if all these people are sort of saying this, and they're very credible scientific people, then what our hope is it going to engage that student and go, wow, wonder if there's something to this. God thing. Maybe if there's something to this transcendent intelligence thing. And then, of course, you go from the 1 minute video, you go to the 8 minute video. Okay. And that's our hope is, of course, there's only about, I suppose, about 1/5 the number of people who actually start watching the 8 minute and do about 3 to 4 minutes worth in the 8 minute. There's a lot less, so if you get 1 million people watching the 1 minute video, you're not going to get that many watching, maybe 200,000 at the most will watch the, 3 or 4 minutes. They won't watch the whole 8 minute. A lot of them will, but a lot of them won't. Maybe 3 to 4 minutes. And then some of them will actually, on the first try round, will probably go and say, well, I wonder what else they've got on this website. Here's this Magis thing. Wonder what they got there. So that's our one of our strategies. But if we draw them in, every time we have a special new scientist speaking about purposeful universe, that is to say, some kind of cosmic purpose within the universe that, maybe betokens, if not indicates, a transcendent intelligence in designing the values for the initial parameters and the free parameters of our universe, that if that becomes sort of a hook, it draws people in. Oh, they got another 1 minute video from another scientist, and then another 1 minute video. And well, maybe I'll look at the 3 minute video from this guy. And maybe I'll even look at the 3 minute video from the last guy, And so our objective is to sort of draw them in. We don't want to, punch anybody or push anybody into it. We just want to draw them in and just say, there's more here than meets the eye. Yeah. And so our objective is really to draw them in. And then finally, one day, after they've watched maybe a few minutes of the longer videos, to go, I wonder what they've got on this Magis website. And the Magis website has 4 different components. One, of course, is science, reason, and faith. That's the first component, no question about it. That's evidence, 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 evidence for God, etc. Then the second one is called happiness and suffering and meaning in life. So when you get to that second landing page, it's really going a little step further. It's trying to say to people, if you don't have religion in your life, if you're non-religiously affiliated, you're going to have a huge increase in depression, anxiety, substance abuse, familial tension, suicidal contemplation, and suicides. And that's, documented not by me, but the American Psychiatric Association. So that's but, I wonder why that would be, and so the idea would be to sort of tempt people into thinking, gosh, we really do have a need for an absolute meaning in life. We really do have a need for some kind of context of hope that's eternal. And more than this, we're made to be in relationship with God. And when we ignore it, the emptiness, the alienation, the loneliness, the dread, the guilt, the fear comes. And so that's the idea would be to say, but keep looking, because right there, it's not that just God exists or an intelligent designer exists or something of that nature, but also that's the key to the meaning of life. That's the key to your highest purpose. That's the key to your identity. That's the key to who you are meant to be. This is the real key. Follow him. So, of course, the minute we get there, to the happiness levels and draw them in, there's that other side of it, the suffering. Well, why does an all-loving God allow suffering? So still on that second webpage, We have to answer that question and then talk about, how do you use faith to suffer well? How do you use faith to purify your heart so that your love will become less and less hindered by egotism, that you're by even narcissism in your life, etc. How can we use our faith to become closer? The suffering to become closer to God, like 2 Corinthians 12. I was given a thorn in the flesh, and an angel of Satan to beat me, to keep me from getting proud. In other words, the idea is that, as Paul says at the end of that passage, as I grow weaker, Christ grows stronger in me. In my weakness, then, is my strength. So the idea then to answer that question of suffering and how to draw closer to God through our vulnerability and suffering, that's kind of the second landing page. And then you get to the third and the fourth landing page, because you can answer that question in a theoretical way, but now we got to get to Jesus. So you get to the third landing page, and the first thing we got to do is say, hey, is Jesus for real? Is there any historical evidence? And is his resurrection for real? Is there any way of scientifically confirm it? You know what I say about the Shroud of Turin, the extensive investigation, scientific investigation of the shroud that has been done, the debunking of the 1988 carbon dating, which is now so debunked by multiple tests. Nobody can possibly believe the 1988 carbon dating anymore. That was just, I'm not going to say it was a fraud, but it's as close to a fraud as you can possibly get if it was unintentional. So the main point is there was a sample taken from an extremely controversial part of the website. Extremely controversial.
Of the shroud. Yeah.
Excuse my lapse of intelligence there. And once that was taken from that place that was burned and was obviously mended by these sisters in the 15th century with cotton, not with linen, which is what the rest of the shroud is made of, which was dyed to look like the shroud's color by a gum dye mordant that was only available in Europe after the 11th century. Give me a break. This is obviously a sample chosen to, as they say, throw off the carbon test. But my point that I'm trying to get to is, what does it tell us about Jesus' resurrection? Well, in all probability, what was probably required for that image, a perfect three-dimensional photographic negative image, to be emblazoned on a non-photographically sensitive linen cloth, is about 6 to 8 billion with a B billion watts of light energy, about 500,000 searchlights worth of light energy emerging for 1/40 billionth of a second in what we call microwave form, but with an intensity so acute that if that blast of light lasted for more than 1/40 billionth of a second, it would have annihilated the entire shroud, including the carbon molecules out of which it was constituted. Now, that's a very unusual burst of light to come from a dead body. They don't actually do these things. So if you got another explanation for that, don't give me a chemical one, and don't give me a scorching interpretation. Don't give me vapors and rub, because none of them will work. And that's been scientifically discounted since way back in 1978 during the Stirp investigation. We've known that. So if it ain't light, what is it? That's the question for all of us dummies. And the other thing, by the way, is that shroud would have to penetrate the body 3/16 of an inch, minimum 3/16 of an inch. Would you mind telling me, how does a cloth penetrate that body for 3/16 of an inch, or all the way through the body in 1/40 billionth of a second, unless the body becomes completely mechanically transparent? That is to say, spiritual. And if the body became spiritual and had a burst of light that was like, hundreds of thousands of searchlights worth of light energy bursting from every three-dimensional spot in that body, would you mind telling me how are you going to explain this naturally and scientifically? I don't think there is such a thing. It's a miracle. It's just supernatural causation. Now, of course, I just made a big leap there, but the leap is not unwarranted.
Exactly.
Exactly. So let's think this through and think, well, maybe Jesus did supply us with the historical and scientific evidence of his resurrection 2,000 years ago. He just made it uncover. I mean, he uncovered it, or made it to be uncovered by the time we got to the 20th and 21st century.
Yeah, it does seem to have, like, it came out and was first realized for what it was, right when it really kind of was needed, it seems like.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of those timing issues, I think, are showing up. One last question, Father.
Sure.
Don't know if it's something that you're asked a lot or just very seldom, but I'm thinking that, with the G.K. Chesterton Society, they say that the most popular question that the director of the G.K. Chesterton Society gets is, hey, I'm trying to get to know this fellow Chesterton. What one book should I read first if I want to get to know Chesterton? And I know you as a wonderfully prolific author with so many different books and collections of wisdom in various directions. If I wanted to just get to know this Father Bob Spitzer, S.J., what book would you think I should read first? Or what is there a key to your trajectory of?
Yeah, I would say, the old scholastic, medieval adage, quid recipitur, whatever is received in the manner of the receiver. So if the receiver, that is you, the person who's looking around and trying to find something of interest, if you have an interest in scientific evidence of God, I would read New Proofs for the Existence of God, Contributions of Contemporary Physics and Philosophy. If you have an interest in the soul, I'd read, the soul's upward yearning, clues to our transcendent nature from experience and reason. If you're just looking for a general introduction to the meaning of life and Bob Spitzer's meanderings through it, which of course are not just mine, the 4 levels of happiness go all the way back to the time of Plato and certainly before. I'm just the latest person to kind of do an iteration of this in my own Spitzerian way. But I think the finding true happiness is maybe the place where everybody could begin. But if somebody really wants to know something about God, I'd probably go with the New Bruce book. Somebody who really wants to know about the soul, I'd really go for the soul's upward yearning. Somebody really wants to know, suffering's the thing that's killing them, I'd really go with The Light Shines On in the Darkness, etc. So, it really depends on what the receiver wants to know.
Fair enough. No, those are good insights. But you'll still forgive us if we strongly recommend to our listeners that they read every book.
Oh, I would encourage that. Although at the end of it, you'll probably be so sick of me, you'll never be able to turn another page again.
Well, then they can simply watch Father Spitzer's Universe on EWTN.
There you go.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out, Father. It's wonderful to talk with you in this way, and we're honored to have your wisdom with us. And we look forward to many years of further communication with you as spectators and as participants.
Oh, thanks so much, Bill and Paul. It's just a pleasure being with you, too.
Yeah. In the spirit of this being Thanksgiving week when we're recording this, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Always.
God bless you both.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. God bless.
Thanks for listening to this episode of That's So Second Millennium. TSSM's audio producer is Morgan Burkhart. Our theme music, Igneous Grok, was composed and performed by Vin Marquardt. For my co-host Bill Schmidt, I'm Paul Giesting. Until next time.